Yeah, I think they found something here on the, I think.
What?
Where they're doing the new Gadea.
Yeah.
With new...
Between the Tzomet Tapuzim and Tzomet Aronit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a busload, a whole bunch of people looking, I think, in a cave over there. I think it's something. I think.
Okay. No, find out. Okay, so we had an amazing Shiur.
We did, I met.
And
We didn't even have time to eat. It was so.
but the nice thing was that people weren't even complaining.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
That's good. Anyway, but we still left a lot of things open. And because of the fact that we had to get to certain places at certain times, parts of the Shiur part of it,
Oh, we missed.
The Shiur part of the Shiur.
the Shiur part of the Shiur, we played down and we did mostly the Shiur. So now we'll do the Hashlamot. So that and that way the people who weren't able to attend will also get some flavor of what we're talking about. Okay? So first of all, those that were there, and even for those that weren't, we went to see the water system that was created originally by the Canaanim or the Yevusim, and eventually Meshuchlad,
Upgraded. Enhanced.
Yeah. Well, no, all the nations, all the nations of Eretz Canaan were called Canaanim, but okay, and it was enhanced by Chizkiyahu because of the
siege of Yerushalayim.
Because of the threat to the siege of Yerushalayim, and therefore everything we explained was explained around that.
It made the whole thing come really alive.
Yeah.
Everything that
Right. Well, that
really came alive.
Yof.
because of this,
Yes, you made my night already.
Okay.
Okay, we go. Okay, now.
Yes, don't expect tips.
Just throw one.
Okay. I'd like now to revisit 4 psukim and look at it now in light of what we saw and see if the psukim make sense to us.
Okay.
Okay? The first set of psukim, you may need a Tanakh because they're not all from Yeshayahu. Okay? The first set of psukim is from Divrei Yamim. If you have your Howie sheets, it's also good. Well, who would think of bringing it, Bemet. But anyway, in Divrei Yamim, Bet, Perek Lamed Bet, okay? Some of these things appeared in the sources, or whatever it's called, the Marei Mekomot. Okay?
Bet is a perek?
Lamed Bet. Okay? In the beginning of the Perek, it says, but now listen carefully. Now that we've been there, we know what they're talking about. After whatever was discussed before, not important for now. Ba Sancheriv melech Ashur, vayavo biYehuda, vayichan al he'arim ha'betzurot, vayomer levikam elav. Okay? Sancheriv came into Judea, and he laid siege or set up his camps around various Judean cities. You got it, Alti?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And he planned to attack the various cities. Vayar Yechizkiyahu kiva Sancheriv ufanav lamilchama al Yerushalayim. And he realized that the final target wasn't just the cities of Judea, but basically, at the end, he wanted to capture the capital, Yerushalayim. Now, it says, "Vayivaetz im sarav v'giborav." So first of all, I'm pointing out those words which, when we read other psukim, will be charig, okay, will be unusual. So it says here, "Vayivaetz im sarav v'giborav." I'm telling you right now, when we read the other references, suddenly he's going to be making decisions himself. Okay, here it says, at least in this rendition of the events, "Vayivaetz im sarav v'giborav."
Now he mentions their name.
Okay, no, he doesn't mention names. Listom et memei ha'ayanot asher michutz la'ir vayazru. He wanted to discuss how are we going to block the springs michutz la'ir. I'm giving the stresses on those things that we both saw and discussed, and that I want to discuss later. Vayazru, and they helped him, which is very nice of them, especially because they were his sarav v'giborav, so it's very nice that they helped him. Vayikavetzu amrav, and since his coalition was helping him, okay, therefore he was able to gather together a large multitude. Vayistemu, now listen to this pasuk carefully. Vayistemu et kol hamayanot. How many mayanot did we find in our travel on Friday? Why two? The Gichon is a mayan.
And the other one.
Everything else was either a te'ala or a brecha.
But there's another one near the Gichon. What is it called?
Right. So down there, there's Ein Rogel.
Ein Rogel.
Okay, so maybe, right, so you could say, what do you want? There are other springs in Jerusalem besides the Gichon. There's also Ein Rogel, and maybe there's another one. So don't be so picky, okay? But I'll point it out, okay? That it doesn't just say, Vayistom et hamayan, or Vayistom et ha-Gichon, but rather, et kol hamayanot. Now comes a line which, bichlal, you'll have to explain, being such experts on Irdavid. ויסתמו את כל המעיינות ואת הנחל השוטף בתוך הארץ.
The brook that flowed in the midst of the land.
Which, how many nechalim did we come across that were flowing through the land in Irdavid? One? None? Is it one? You're saying like Nachal Kidron maybe. Okay, good. So one theory could say, if you're saying a Nachal Hashotef B'toch Haaretz, so one candidate could be Nachal Kidron. However, while I pointed out the Nachal Kidron, it was much deeper than today, but then as today, how much water did you see in Nachal Kidron?
Right, but he
today we
took
didn't
the
see
water
of the Gichon, right?
And passed it through his tunnel to the Shiur. Before that tunnel was built,
Right.
it had to
Flow somewhere.
Flow freely on the ground, and at the lowest point being the
Going into the, in other words, you're saying it flowed and eventually it flowed into the Kidron.
yeah.
Okay, but first of all, so if you want to take the theory that the Nachal Hashotef B'toch Haaretz.
Well, you say it does flow all year round.
No, it doesn't. That's exactly what I'm saying. It doesn't. Oh, the spring. The spring. No, one second. The spring flows.
Yeah.
Okay, but the Kidron itself only flows or flowed. Only flowed when it rains. Okay, and even then it's unlike, I don't know.
Quantity of water coming through this tunnel all the time.
Through what tunnel?
Now what's called Hezekiah's tunnel.
1 second. Wait. 1 second. He's now talking to his Sarav Vagiborav.
Yeah. Wait, that's Shoshi Goyes. That's very strange.
Good.
Why she would.
Shiur stops. Shosh is calling. Stop. He's talking to his advisors what to do. The Assyrians are encamping around the city. We have to decide what to do. The decision was, let's block up all the springs, and let's also block up the flowing river that flows through the land.
It's funny because here, this is
Why are we
acceptable,
trying to do-
presumably, it talks about the flowing river as the Gichon spring.
Good.
Why-
We have to accept that challenge and say, do we accept that or don't we accept that?
Why do you want to do that? Isn't like they're cutting off your nose.
First of all, the Gichon spring is not a nachal that flows through the land, but okay. Huh?
What good is that?
What?
Cutting off the water. You're cutting off your nose despite your.
No, they cut it off outside.
No, there are two. We had two objectives. We always had two objectives. One, I didn't finish the puzzle. One objective is that we should be able to get the water which is outside the city. If it's outside the city and the enemy is camped around the city, we can't get to it. Can't get to our water. So objective number one, and probably the foremost objective, is we should have water. Without water, we can't live. Okay. Objective number two
They shouldn't have.
is they shouldn't have, because then they won't be able to keep the siege for long. So if we read the pasuk goes like this: Vayistemu et kol hamayanot ve'et hanachal hashotef b'toch haaretz lemor. Why did they do that? Lemor, lama yavo malchei Ashur umatzu mayim rabim. Why should the enemy come, the Assyrian enemy come and find water?
What is it? The Jews are doing this demand?
Yeah, of course.
But the Jews are inside Yerushalayim.
Right, but they still control Yerushalayim, and the enemy hasn't yet
Water
arrived.
is coming from outside Yerushalayim.
Right.
No.
So till now,
If they block it,
till
the water
now,
won't come from outside.
yeah.
It'll collect outside. They'll have water. We won't.
Nachon.
לא היית בטיול, זה מחובר.
So, okay, so the idea is, right. But I'm glad he's asking the question, because he's able to ask the question without any prejudice and without any prior knowledge. When we read this pasuk, does this pasuk say anything about bringing the water into the city? No.
It just talks, it kind of sounds spiteful.
Excuse me?
It sounds like a
No, it's not spiteful. We're waging war.
Why should we provide water to the Assyrians?
More than that, if we don't provide water to the Syrians, maybe they'll leave.
Obviously, he was going to connect the pipe with a pump.
No obviousnesses here. Okay.
No obvious.
Okay. So he says, and so I'm purposely trying to point out the difference I'm saying. So what can we say about this group of psukim? That the water that when they knew that the Syrians were going to come, they decided, what should we do about the water situation? The decision was to block up the water sources, which happen to be outside. They have to be outside the city, because that's the physical fact. It happens to be that it was outside the city. Therefore, okay, now what we did see on Friday is that through this entire underground, these underground tunnels which we went through, even they were able to get to the water without having to expose themselves. Okay? So they were able to get to the water source even though it was outside the city. In other words, they had tunnels that went under. They had access from the inside. They went under.
So what were they blocking?
The outside.
They wanted to block up the entrance to the spring, so that when the enemy comes and they look for water, they don't know where the spring is. Okay? Block up any place where the water is visible to flow.
Cover it.
Camouflage it. Camouflage it. Okay. But it doesn't mention anything about the Gichon, even if the thing does say something of that. It doesn't say, let's bring the water into the city, which is what we're always talking about, all right? But what it does say is, the next pasuk says, Vayitchazek, vayiven et kol hachoma haprutza. Suddenly, we're talking about water the whole time, right? Suddenly he says what he did was that he built up the choma, the wall of the city which had been which had been parutz, okay?
What does it mean, making it higher than the towers? Raising it above the
Vayal al hamigdalot, okay? And he made the choma higher than the towers.
Visualize that.
Okay, it's not too difficult, I can explain it to you. V'lachutza hachoma acheret. Okay? Okay, and how does he translate that? I'm curious.
And he erected another wall outside of it. He erected another wall outside of it.
Okay.
He fortified the Milo.
Okay, that's it. That's as much as we want to say right now. Okay? So here we have one group of psukim which tells the story. Okay? In Divrei Amim, Perek Lamed Bet, in the beginning of the Perek. No mention of the Gichon. No mention of bringing water into the city. Okay? And the purpose seems to be to keep the enemy from getting the water. And one of the things, he had to gather together an awful lot of people. What does that indicate to you?
I don't see how they keep the enemy from getting water. You block water going into an entrance underground.
Right.
That water is not going to go into the entrance underground. So where is it going to go? It's going to collect, but outside the city.
No, it wasn't blocked. It wasn't blocked.
Water comes out of a cave. Okay? The cave, in earliest times, was flowing water freely, like you said. Okay? As time went on, the people who controlled the water, who controlled the city, were the Canaanim, 4,000 years ago, built fortresses to protect this cave. So now you no longer see the cave anymore. You see a fortress, towers, protecting the cave. Okay? As time went on, they dug tunnels so that the water, as it flows out, should flow into a tunnel so that it can be used for irrigation. Okay? Now, but it's still since these things are outside the walls of the city, if an enemy comes, okay, so they'll see these towers, they'll attack the towers, and they'll get to the source of the water. But if you camouflage the whole thing, and they don't know where it is, so the water is still flowing into the city or wherever it's flowing, in these tunnels, into the irrigation
It does
tunnels.
say here, stop up the waters of the springs. I mean, that's
Where does it say that?
translation of the-
Yeah, stuff up the waters of the spring. I didn't say no. I just said good, but it doesn't say anything about doing anything with the water that's in the spring, like making some sort of a big mifal nikvat chizkiyahu, which is what we're talking about the whole time.
No, but saying that,
Stop up
Mel
sounds like-
is a point. When you say stopping up the waters, and it sounds like they cannot flow. They're
Okay,
stopped.
so good. So he has a point, but it's not the point that he's making, but he has a point. You're right. We'll come back to it.
Did you get that?
Okay.
I said he was a goat.
Yeah. Huh? Right. Okay. Now I want you to go to the end of this very same chapter. The end of this very same chapter, summing up, last pasuk lamed sums up Chizkiyahu's career. Okay. And there was a lot of things happened. Sancheriv came. Sancheriv left. There was a miracle. Pesach. Chizkiyahu got sick. He got better. He died. Okay. And now, in the end of this chapter is summing up his achievements. And it says, V'hu Chizkiyahu satam et motza memei Gichon ha'elyon. Listen, each word is important.
Yeah.
He, Chizkiyahu, blocked up the source, if you will, or the outgo, or the place where the water of the Gichon ha'elyon exits. That's a good way of saying it. Exits, motza. Vayashrem lemata marava le'Irdavid. Completely different story.
Diverted them underground.
He diverted them
The city of David.
down west into the city of David. That's what he did. That's very good. That was his great achievement. There's only one problem with this great achievement. That is nothing about what it said in the beginning of the chapter. Completely different. No, the beginning of the chapter, it doesn't talk about the Gichon. Okay, it doesn't talk about.
It's not like doesn't say. It simply goes into more detail.
Said okay, we'll accept.
Maybe it's two things.
We'll
now.
accept.
Conflict.
We have right.
Talking
So
about two
good. So
different
now we have.
No, the same
Oh,
thing.
Yefemot.
Just go into more detail.
So Geveret Moyer says
The Rabbanit.
the Rabbanit. Excuse me. The Rabbanit says.
Where are we?
The Rabbanit says, what are you talking about? One is an explanation of the other, right? The first part of the chapter is talking about the situation at war, and therefore it specifically says what they did. But now we're summing up his career. So now we're saying, okay, what was really the pinnacle of what he did then?
Or the specifics.
Okay, was the fact that he was able to block the exit of the waters of the Gichon, okay? And not only that, but to divert them down west into the city of David.
But it's
Okay.
hill. It's uphill. If you go west,
No. Water in those days, without pumps, only flowed downhill. As a matter of fact, one of the great, even today, one of the great achievements of Chizkiyahu, if you think about it, 2,700 years ago, is that the tunnel is 0.5 kilometer long, and the difference of height from the beginning of the tunnel to the end of the tunnel is 30 centimeters. In other words,
So it's
they were at the
slightest
slightest gravitational thing. As a matter of fact, that brings us back to a pasuk that we learned in Yeshayahu, in Perek Chet. Yeshayahu is criticizing Achaz and the people of Yehuda for not trusting in Hashem, but rather wanting to get the help of the Assyrians. Ashur, exactly. So in Pasuk, in Perek Chet, what does Yeshayahu say? Yeshayahu says, no, but that's a good pasuk for something else, which we'll get to in a second. Okay.
no, the Irdavid was down really, so it doesn't have to go up. The water didn't have to go
נכון,
up.
נכון.
Irdavid זה כנראה.
Chirp and snort.
Yeah, where is it?
Pasuk Vav.
Vav, Yofi, thank you. He says like this in Pasuk Vav, Vayosef Hashem daber elai od leimor, Ya'an ki ma'as ha'am hazeh et mei hashiloach haholchim la'at.
They were complaining about it.
So the people were complaining and saying, no, this is a metaphor supposedly, in which Yeshayahu says that since the people weren't happy with the kingdom of David, okay, who was seen as a small little kingdom, and all they wanted was to hear what the big powers had to say. So Hashem came to me, says Yeshayahu, and said to me, Ya'an ki ma'as ha'am hazeh et mei hashiloach, which is the Jews, the Jewish government, since they disdained the Jewish government and Hashem's government, which he compares to the waters of the Shiloach, which flow ever so slowly, okay, and they prefer umisos et ritzin uben remalyahu, lachen hine Adonai ma'ale alehem et mei hanahar ha'atzumim ve'harabim et melech Ashur. ואת כל כבודו, ועלה על כל אפיקיו, והלך על כל גדותיו. The whole comparison is here is on rivers. He's saying, since you disdain your own powers, the Jews, which are compared to the Mea Shiloach HaHolech La'at. So I'm not trying to get back to Perchet now. I'm just trying to say that here, interestingly, we see how the Mea Shiloach. Okay, the only problem we have with this pasuk is very simple. Yeshayahu is talking to Melech Achaz. Achaz happens to be Chizkiyahu's father, which means that the Mei HaShiloach, which I so eloquently explained a second ago, that it's 533 meters and 30 centimeters from Motza La Brecha, wasn't built yet. So which Mei Shiloach HaHolech La'at is he talking about?
It had to flow somewhere.
You're right. You're 100% right. I'm just trying to get to the answer. You're right.
Maybe he was referring to the Kidron.
Maybe he was referring to
He
the
said
Kidron.
all along, there wasn't enough time for Chizkiyahu to build all that, just what
Right.
the Syrians
Yefeh.
were having.
Yefeh.
So maybe it
The
was
Canaanite
really-
one.
Okay, so there's a theory that says, but he didn't build it when he was a baby. You're right.
Okay, but it was already
No, I'm saying, no, he was thinking about it. As a child, he was playing with the Lego, right, and he was building tunnels with the Lego, and huh?
Yeah, there was a Canaanite tunnel that we walked through.
Yeah, underneath.
Yeah, okay. This is where I'm coming to. I'm trying to come to the fact that when you choose to walk through the dry tunnel, which we did, most people take it as a consolation prize and say, okay, we won't walk through Nikvat Chizkiyahu because we don't want to get our feet wet, we don't want to get cold, we're too old, it's too narrow, it's too dark, claustrophobia, so we'll walk through the dry tunnel or the Knani tunnel.
We use our flashlights.
Huh? Okay. And here's a theory that says, wait a second. Before there was a talat, and this is what Ted's been pushing at and I've been ignoring him.
Yeah.
Before there was a Nikbat Chizkiyahu, the water flowed somewhere because they needed the water. And the water had to irrigate also their fields. And where did it flow? Obviously where it flowed. What was that tunnel doing? So we can walk through it? That's why they built that tunnel, so we can walk through it? No. There was a tunnel there, which we walked through, which was flowing with water. Why is it dry?
Because he diverted it.
He didn't divert that. He diverted the waters. Well, basically, all he did, all Chizkiyahu did, as far as the dry tunnel was to start the dry tunnel, start his tunnel, Nikvat Chizkiyahu, 2 meters lower than the tunnel we walked through. The second he made it lower and the water started flowing out from over here, the water stopped flowing out over here, and therefore the tunnel suddenly became dry.
What was wrong with the Canaanite tunnel?
And what was wrong with the Canaanite? Why did Chizkiyahu have to build another tunnel? We have a wonderful tunnel here.
Okay.
Right.
What's the
Yeah,
answer?
fair. 1 second. We have till 9 o'clock, no?
Enjoy the question.
And that we'll get to it by 9 o'clock. But
When you walk through the Herodian and other places,
Yeah.
walk off the rebellion,
Yeah.
you have tunnels all over the place.
no,
They were built in order for guerrilla warfare, in order to
Right.
go from point.
Well, they
X to
weren't. They were
Y.
built actually to gather the water originally, but all right.
The office already.
No, but there are tunnels that are built for the
Yeah,
sake of
okay,
getting-
yeah, okay. So we looked at two sources. We have the Rabbanit's theory that we're really talking about the same incident, the same tunnel, the same everything, just a little different look at it. And we have the Rav's theory, which is, wait a minute, maybe we're talking about two different tunnels, because the second quote, okay, which sums up his career, okay, clearly says, and back to Lamed Bet, Pasuk Lamed, right? Clearly says, V'hu Chizkiyahu satam et motza meimei Gichon ha'elyon v'yashrem lemata marav al Irdavid. It clearly is describing Chizkiyahu's tunnel. Okay. So we've seen...
Once it was going from the top, now he made it lower. So the top one is dry, they couldn't get it. And now he's using the bottom one.
Fine, but Ted asked very, very well. Combined with Dina's question, okay, the enemy's there. To build Chizkiyahu's tunnel, which was 533 meters, what we walked through was all of 120 meters. Nachon, that there was a hemshech to it, which we didn't walk to, and we'll talk in a second why we didn't walk to it, besides the fact that it's closed. But why is it closed? Chizkiyahu's tunnel is much longer, much wider, in most places much taller. It was in most places it's mituyach, which the Kanani tunnel that we walked through was not mituyach, and so on and so forth. In other words, the Chizkiyahu's tunnel was much more fancy, okay, but he could have mishapetzt the earlier tunnel, especially because he was in a lachatz zman atomi. Okay, you see that from the beginning of this parak. In other words, he called together everybody. Vayikbetzu amrav. Why do you have Yikbetzu amrav? Because we don't have any time. Because the Syrians are coming. We have no time. We have a tremendous project to do. Okay, and therefore they agreed. Vayikbetzu amrav, and they did all these things. Okay, let's look at a third source. Okay, a third source appears in Melachim. Melachim Bet, Kaf Kaf. Here also, it's summarizing Chizkiyahu's career. Okay, here also, previously it told the story of Sancheriv, etc. Now he's saying, summarizing Chizkiyahu's career. V'yeter divrei Chizkiyahu, v'chol gevurato, v'asher asa et ha-brecha. We just had two previous sources. I never heard anything about a brecha. V'asher asa et ha-brecha, something new. He made a brecha. Ve'et ha-te'ala. Don't remember hearing that word before either. Asher asa et ha-brecha ve'et ha-te'ala, vayavei et ha-mayim ha'ira. Halohem ktuvim al sefer divrei hayamim lemalchei Yehuda. Vayishkav Yechizkiyahu ma'avotav vayimloch b'seder. Okay, so in this source, let's call it source 3, okay, suddenly, no reference to the Gichon, no reference to Sancheriv.
Right.
Okay, similarly, I failed to mention source 2, the end of Divrei Yamim Lamed Bet. Also, it doesn't seem to connect this life work of Chizkiyahu with the war.
Well, there was no warfare.
Excuse
There
me?
was nothing to write about. There was no warfare.
No, there
For
wasn't.
him, there's no war. Nothing happened in
150,000 people
Yerushalayim.
died stam.
Nothing happened in Yerushalayim. There's no warfare. There's nothing to write about.
Beseder.
So, the most important
So what did he do it
thing
for?
was the water.
Okay, good.
No.
Then what did he do it for altogether? He did it.
He took
It's
this
not
to
that
be
it's
a
not
war.
great, but they didn't fight, so he went
Yeah,
away.
he
There
took
was
this
nothing
to
to
be a
write.
war. Back then there was no
You only
war.
write if it's bad, if something happens.
Oh, but why did he? It says to bring the water into the city. So why did he bring the water into the city for? Or why did he? Or why was it such a great achievement if there was no war?
And excuse me, wasn't there always water being brought into the city by the Jebusite for previous?
How did they bring the water into the city?
They had their
The Canaan.
The dry tunnel that we went through. Okay,
Exactly.
yes, but you have to understand that the routes of the two tunnels are different.
Okay.
Okay, the Jebusite tunnel came out of Remember where the source is? It's on the right back, almost at the bottom in Nachal Kidron. The water ran down in the dry tunnel, more or less almost parallel to Nachal Kidron, ending up where? We don't yet know. Okay? But let's assume that it ended up in some pool. It had to end up in some pool. Nevertheless, over here in Melachim, it praises Chizkiyahu for building, for bringing it into the city and building a pool, as if there was no pool before. Okay. Now, to support.
Well, the water didn't come into the city, so obviously there was no pool there. It was outside. They made a pool.
No, but once Chizkiyahu also built a wall, this wall that was mentioned in source number 1, so it's in the city, Kilu. But you're right, it didn't run through the entire city. Now, Dina said that she has a source there on the bottom that said that the
river.
In referring to referring in Lamed Bet, in Divrei Yamim Lamed Bet Aleph, when it first says that Chizkiyahu talked to his advisors and all that, there it's specifically talking about the war situation, right? It says, Chizkiyahu was in a panic, what do? And they decided that what we have to do is gather together a lot of people, listom et ha'mayanot ve'et ha'nachal ha'shotef b'toch ha'aretz, which we don't know what that is. Okay? And that's what they did, but they also built a wall. Okay?
That's the joint tunnel.
Good. Yeah, fair. But you have to explain why. How do you explain that means that? But you're right. I mean, that's the direction I'm going in. Okay? Okay, so Dina said, Lumat Alti, Shesavar, listen. Lumat Alti that said that we're talking about two different things. Dina said no. When it's referring to the stima, we're referring to the story of the Gichon. Okay? Now,
it also makes a reference to the further on, to Pasuk Lamed.
It makes a reference to it over there. Yeah, no, they want to tie the whole thing together. Okay, good.
It does say it.
Right. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to read to you a Madhim Gemara, which may or may not help us in our search for the truth.
Probably won't.
Can I ask you something, please?
Yes, please.
There's another ta'ala, or whatever, that we went to. I can't remember if it was with you, and it was outside of Yerushalayim by the
Near
bush.
Efrat.
And yeah, right. And you guys went into that, and that goes all the way up to
Okay.
the city.
All that is much later. All that is much later.
No.
It's all much later. It's Chashmonaim and then Hordus. They bring water from Gush Etzion.
25
Kilometers.
centimeters off on the 200
Yeah.
kilometers or something.
That's the waterworks of Herod, which also bring water to the Herodian. Listen to this Gemara. Madhim Gemara. For us. Tanur Rabbanan. It appears in two places. We're reading it from Mesechet Psachim, Nun Vav. Tanur Rabbanan, Shisha Dvarim asa Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Chizkiyahu did a lot of things, but there were 6 major things that Chizkiyahu did. Al Shlosha Hodulo. On 3 of them, he was praised for it. By who? By the people of Machne Yehuda? No, by Chazal. In other words, Chazal saw it as a mitzvah. He did a good thing. Ve'al shlosha lo hodulo.
So one of those was.
So I'm not going to go into what Chazal thought was a worthy deed of Chizkiyahu. The shocking thing is, ve'al shlosha lo hodulo.
One of them was this.
One of them was Satam Me Gichon Ha'elyon V'lo Hodulo, which is very shocking. After everything we read in the Tanakh and everything we know about Chizkiyahu, okay, here's a Gemara that says that the fact that he blocked the Gichon Ha'elyon was a bad thing. Rashi, why? So Rashi says like this.
We need to ask God.
Huh?
First
First of all, before Rashi explains why, Rashi explains what does it mean, Satam Me Hagichon. So he says like this, Ki dichtiv, as it's written. This is Tomechs in in Dina. Ki dichtiv, in Divrei Hayamim Lamed Bet, Leman lo yavou malchei Ashur v'yimtzeu mayim lishtot. So Rashi is basically saying that first quote, which doesn't mention the Gichon, is talking about the Gichon. In other words, all these references, which I said, look, note that here it says Gichon and there it doesn't say Gichon, here it says this, maybe we're talking about two different things, Alti. No, Rashi mixes it all together in one mix, and he says, when Satam Gichon is referring to when Chizkiyahu says to his advisors that the Assyrians shouldn't get water, which is, of course, that quote or that source, which I said Bichal doesn't even refer to the Gichon, doesn't refer to bringing water into the city. Why lo hodulo? So Rashi says, Shehaya lo liftoach ba'Kodesh Baruch Hu. Okay? She'amar, Hashem says in Melachim, V'ganoti al ha'ir hazot lehoshia. Hashem promises
protection, deliverance.
That don't worry, don't be so, so frightened from the Assyrians. I, Hashem, will protect the city, and not one arrow will be fired at the city.
But doesn't God help those who help themselves?
One second. That's a good discussion. Not tonight. Huh?
How come Yirmiyahu doesn't use that?
One second. But one second. Now. One second. So first of all, that's how Rashi explains. She won the thing, so she gets the phone. Yeah, right. So, but we have to understand that when does Hashem tell Chizkiyahu that he's going to protect the city? Right when the Sancherif come? No. Remember last week, I tell you this whole story. Rav Shakeh comes and he speaks Hebrew on the walls, and everybody starts trembling, and they come back to Chizkiyahu and they say, Sancherif is coming, etc., etc. And then what does Chizkiyahu do besides rend his clothes? He says, go to the prophet Yeshayahu ben Amotz and tell him to pray. And it's Yeshayahu who tells Chizkiyahu, don't worry, Hashem says that the city will be saved. Which means that you can't, if Chizkiyahu started building this tunnel before Hashem promised him that he was going to be saved, then we shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
לא נבוא אליו בטענות. נכון? So the question is, what happened when?
What came first?
Okay.
Or maybe stop.
Or
stop the building.
Okay, good. That's also an interesting thought. Right. Also, we have to take into account, like I said, that Chizkiyahu's tunnel, Nikvat Chizkiyahu, the archaeologists did all kinds of chishuvim. How long would it take to build Chizkiyahu's tunnel using the technology? Look, if they used today's technology, it would probably take 20 years, just like the
Shari Tikva.
No, just like the Rakebet HaKala. Okay, that took 20 years, right? So how long would the Chizkiyahu's tunnel take? 2,000 years, something like that, which is about how long it took. But Im Kol Zeh, the archaeologists did a chishuv as to how long, using picks and axe, okay, and the engineering knowledge which they had, which was b'chol, you had two teams. Remember, we read the inscription? Mm-hmm. The inscription said there were two teams that were going towards each other, somehow, 50 meters below the ground, okay, and somehow they met. Okay, so which is amazing unto itself, and we still don't know how they did it. But after all that, they figure that if they worked day and night, okay, 24/7 as they would say, okay, it would take about
24/6.
If they were 24/7, they're not dati, no. The archaeologists. Pikuach nefesh. Toda rabba. Anyway, they figure it would take about 4, 5, 6 years. 4 to 6 years. 4 to 6 years to build the tunnel. So now the question.
Unless they brought 250,000 Chinamen.
Doesn't matter what's going to happen in a tunnel. In a tunnel, you can have one guy. All the Chinamen could just take the dirt out. No, I'm serious. In other words, the team didn't have to be big because there's just so much you can do. You understand? There's one guy, Sachakol, at the end who's going like this, and everybody else is just
like today.
passing the sacks, of earth out. Okay, so
It was big, no?
Huh?
People can walk.
no. You can't walk. No, we didn't do. I mean, even in the Kanani tunnel, we couldn't walk past each other. No, same thing. Same in Nikvat Chizkiah. Okay, I want to go back also now to this Nachal HaShotef B'chol Haaretz. Okay, Nachal Shotef is a terminology that's used 3 times in the Tanakh. Okay, twice in Yeshayahu. So to understand what the Nachal Shotef means, okay, if we can look in the last parak of for instance, in the last parak of Yeshayahu. Samech Vav. Okay, Siyum. Same parak that we read off the wall. We read it off the wall. Samech Vav. Pasuk Yud Bet. He's saying, if you look at Yud, Simchu et Yerushalayim v'gilu ba kol ohavea, sisu ota ita masos kol hamitablim aleh. Good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay? And he's saying, Kicho amar Hashem, Pasuk Yud Bet, Kicho amar Hashem, Hineni note eleha kenahar shalom. I'm going to bring peace to Yerushalayim like a river. Uchenachal shotef. Uchenachal shotef, kvod goyim binaktem. And I'm going to bring the riches of the goyim, kvod goyim, kenachal shotef. What's Yeshayahu saying? How does Yeshayahu define the term nachal shotef?
It's a metaphor
for surging stuff. Okay, so now when he's talking really about a nachal, using the same term, nachal shotef. So clearly, Yeshayahu, I'm back to Divrei Yamim Lamed Bet, Bet Lamed Bet Aleph, or Bet, or whatever it is that we were. And he says, "Vayistemu et kol hamayanot vet nachal hashotef betoch haaretz." He's referring to this big surging river. And I ask you, where was there a surging river?
Kidron.
Okay, so how he says Kidron? I'm saying the Kidron, in the best of times, unless there's a big rain, it never surges. Okay, so now.
No, but it describes it. Here it's talking metaphorically. The surging river isn't really a river.
But rather?
It's peace.
No, you're talking about Yeshayahu.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Yeshayahu compares the peace that's going to come to the land as a raging river.
Right.
Now I'm going back to Divrei Yamim Lamed Bet, where he wants to block up all
maybe that's what he wants to block up. Peace.
Block the Bibi. It's like Bibi. He wants to block no peace. He doesn't want to believe in peace. Vayistemu et kol hamayanot. Okay, he's blocking up all the springs. Ve'tanachal hashotef b'chotoch haaretz. A very difficult line. Because we were there on Friday, we didn't see any Nachal Shotef B'chotoch Haaretz. So, here you have to also be a Balkori. And you have to read the line like this. Vayistemu et kol hamayanot ve'et hanachal hashotef b'toch haaretz. Now, what does b'toch haaretz mean? First of all.
Underground.
B'toch haaretz doesn't mean
Throughout the land.
It
means underground.
B'toch haaretz means in the tunnel, in the land. In the ground. What we didn't see on Friday is a raging nachal above the ground, because there isn't any. However, since he's going to sotem the mayanot, ve'et hanachal, hashotef b'toch haaretz, which is flowing in the land, so now we know what he wants to stuff up. He wants to stuff up the only water that is flowing continuously in the land. And here you guys are right. We're talking about what we walked through. The ta'ala hayevesha haknanit hamekorit. In other words, when David HaMelech comes to Yevus, he already then finds the Gichon flowing into this dry tunnel that we walked through. And it's flowing. And that thing is flowing. All the residents of Yerushalayim at the time of Chizkiyahu know that it's flowing because that's their water source. As a matter of fact, it irrigates all the fields in Nachal Kidron and on the right and the left. That's why, if you noticed, when we walked through it, there was sort of like here and there windows, if you will, okay, which were irrigation windows. back then, okay? And that's how they irrigated the whole area from the Gihon down to Brechat HaShiloach.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when he mityaetzt with his Sarav v'giborav, they said, let's eliminate that tunnel, because that tunnel has a lot of windows, and it's flowing, it's gushing away. Okay, so the question is, shall we try to stuff up all the windows, okay, or shall we do something more mituchkam? Okay, I guess the deal was, let's build an alternate tunnel, okay, lower than the Kanani tunnel. That'll in one
Fell
swoop stop the water flow in the Nachal HaShotef b'toch haaretz. Okay?
Divert the water into
the water will now go through a different tunnel, and this whole problem will be eliminated. And that is what.
And why was that a bad thing?
And why is that a bad thing?
Aside from the fact that he didn't.
Because they didn't believe in the Kaddish Baruch Hu.
No. All this happened. All this is happening before the Kaddish Baruch Hu said anything. At this point, he was in every way. This is what the king should do: try to defend the country, pikuach nefesh, until the Navi said what he said. This is what he was supposed to do. So therefore, also that's question number one. Question number two is what I slipped in a few minutes ago, which was that it takes years to build this thing. We just explained that he had to get all these people together quickly and all that because there was no time. He had maybe, 2 months.
That had to be the finishing touches.
Okay? Meaning
that he had already done it before.
that he had already, kanireh, built Nikvat Chizkiyahu beforehand.
And this was just like the final.
Okay, he had already built Nikvat Chizkiyahu kanireh beforehand, or at least he had built part of it. In other words, part of the Nikvat Chizkiyahu had been apparently built beforehand. Okay,
and now why would that have been? Because he was anticipating this type of thing.
Okay, now we still have the question of why Bichlal did he build Nikvat Chizkiyahu when he B'chol Zot had the Tala Knanit?
And why was it a bad thing?
Okay, the bad thing we didn't get to yet. Okay. So first of all, what did Chizkiyahu do though? In other words, okay, Nikvat Chizkiyahu, because the Gemara says it was a bad thing, therefore we have to come to the conclusion that Nikvat Chizkiyahu was put into operation after he was given the promise of that the city would be saved. Okay, which means that at this moment in time, when he's mityaetzing with his Sarav v'giborav, he is unable to actually put Nikvat Chizkiyahu, his new fancy tunnel, into operation yet. He may be 90% finished, it may be 60% finished, but it's not operational. Okay, therefore, he still had, in some way or another, had to stop the waters of the Nachal HaShotef b'toch haaretz, Kri, the dry tunnel, what we call the dry tunnel. Okay, for this purpose it sounds funny. If it's a Nachal HaShotef b'toch haaretz, so we'll call it the Nachal, we'll call it the Ta'ala Knanit. Okay, the simple way of saying is, we'll call the Ta'ala Knanit Te'alat HaShiloach, and we'll call Chizkiyahu's tunnel Nikbat HaShiloach, Bediok, or Nikbat Chizkiyahu. Okay? Okay. Good. We're at least closing in on what's happening. Okay?
Perhaps because his tunnel serves the purpose of bringing water into the city solely. The other one serves the purpose of providing
irrigation
outside.
Okay. In other words, it does seem that his tunnel, I guess it's also important to know where these tunnels ended. And all indications, that we can't say today for sure, okay? But all indications seem to indicate that the tunnels ended up more or less the same place. And that same place is more or less Brechat HaShiloach,
just outside
Brechat HaShiloach, which is what we saw. I'm going to bring you now to our final source, and that's Yeshayahu Kaf Bet. In Yeshayahu Kaf Bet, Yeshayahu is also criticizing Chizkiyahu. And he says the following. I'm reading, let's say, from Pasuk Chet. Okay? And he's saying, or Tet, okay? He says, Vet bikiei Irdavid, Vet bikiei Irdavid, Ri'item kirabu. You saw that the pratzot, the breaches, right? The breaches in Irdavid were many. In other words, the situation was problematic from a military point of view. And what did you do? Vatekabtzu et mei habrecha hatachtona. And you gathered together the waters of the lower pool. Now we have a new concept.
What do they mean by that? Lower pool.
We have a new concept now called the lower pool. I want to remind you.
Kanani is the higher pool.
But then we're talking about we were talking about the Gichon Ha'elyon, Motza Gichon Ha'elyon. I want to remind you that we read in Yeshayahu, when he comes to Achaz, in the beginning of... Right, exactly. Read how does that pasuk? How does the laundry pasuk go? The laundry pasuk is in the beginning of Perek Zayin, if I remember correctly. Right. It says like this. In the beginning of pasuk Zayin, it says Perek Zayin. Vahibi me'achaz ben Yotam ben Uziyahu melech Yehuda. That's when Allah Ratzin melech Aram Pekach ben Mariah they came Yerushalayim la milchama, and they were very scared. Pasuk Gimel, Zayin Gimel. Vayomer Hashem el Yeshayahu. We learned this only a few weeks ago. So, Vayomer Hashem el Yeshayahu. Tzei na likrat Achaz. Go out to Achaz. Ata v'shar yashuv b'necha el ktzei te'alat habrecha ha'elyona el misilat sdei chobes. Go out to the te'ala that leads from the upper pool, to the road of the laundry girls. Okay? So what do we see from that pasuk? And from the pasuk that I'm now reading from in Yeshayahu Kaf Bet, that there was an upper pool and there was a lower pool. Oh, that's interesting. Now, when we were standing and watching that boy being anointed king, okay, we were standing sort of on a platform. And we explained that we're standing mamash on top of the spring of the Gichon. To our left, and we were in this tremendous cavern.
Right.
Okay, to our left in this cavern was a tremendous pool. In other words, the waters of the Gichon, until they built ta'alot, be it the ta'ala haknanit, or the be it ta'alat hashiloach, or nikbat hashiloach. Okay, first they gathered the waters into this tremendous pool. Okay, then they built this ta'ala, which we walked through from the region of this pool, and it flowed downstream in the ta'ala, eventually ending up kanireh in the area of Brechat HaShiloach, the lower pool. Okay, now back to Kaf Bet. He says,
what would have been the purpose of that?
One second. Vet bikiei Irdavid ri'item kirabu vatkaptzu et mei habrecha hatachtona. Now listen to the next pasuk. Vet batei Yerushalayim sfartem vatitzu habatim levatzer hachoma. He's criticizing Yeshayahu. He's saying, Chizkiyahu, you destroyed people's houses to build a choma. Okay? Umikveh asitem, and you also built a mikveh, but it doesn't mean a mikveh here. It means a pool. Okay? Umikveh asitem bein hachomotayim lemei habrecha hayeshana. Okay, you made a new pool. Okay, between the walls for the waters of the old pool. Now, what's he saying? We just learned in Divrei Yamim that when they gathered together the war council, one of the things they did was build an additional wall along Nahal Kidron. Why did they build an additional wall along Nachal Kidron? Suddenly, as part of their emergency measures, okay?
Protection. To protect
of what?
The water.
But if the waters were going to flow into Nikbat Chizkiyahu, Chizkiyahu's Nikba goes inland. We wouldn't have to build a wall over there. Conclusion has to be the following. Conclusion has to be that besides the walls of the city, which were present at the time of Chizkiyahu, Chizkiyahu wanted to divert the waters into his fancy new Nikba, but it wasn't ready. And therefore, they said, the only thing we can do right now, if it were ready, I would just let the waters go into my Nikba, which runs lower than the dry tunnel that we went through, and that would solve the problem. But I can't solve the problem that way. Therefore, we have to gather around a lot of people. And we have to stuff up all these chalonot, all these openings, the irrigation things, in the Ta'ala HaYivesha, in the Ta'alat HaShiloach. But we have to also protect the Ta'alat HaShiloach, because the water is now going to keep running. During the invasion, okay, we've come to the conclusion we have no choice. We have to keep the water running in the old Ta'ala HaYivesha HaKnanit. Okay, we have to protect it. Therefore, one of the decisions that we saw in Divrei Yamim was to build an additional wall. Therefore, we now have a new term that we just see in Sefer Yeshayahu, we never saw before. Bein HaChomotayim. What kind of mean Bein HaChomotayim? We're building, he says he built a pool between the walls, because he built an additional outer wall to protect our tunnel that we walked through.
Right.
Okay? Therefore, we now have a Bein Chomotayim situation. We have the original wall. We have a new wall, which was built to the east, okay, towards Nachal Kidron, to protect the pool. Okay, and now we can read the pasuk, and he says like this: "Umikveh asitem bein chomotayim, lemei habrecha hayeshana." Okay, you built it for the waters of the old pool, meaning the brecha ha'elyona,
which is still running.
Which was the brecha, which was gathering the waters of the Gihon until the opening of Nikbat Chizkiyahu. And he criticizes Chizkiyahu by saying, "V'lo hibadatem el oseha v'yotzra merachok lo raitem," and you didn't. And all this you took credit for as your great inventions without looking to Hashem for direction, etc. That's over here, okay? But at the end, Hashem comes along and says, "Good, what you did was fine, okay? You built, you fortified apparently what he did, Yechizkiyahu then, was to stuff up the windows, but also to extend that Ta'ala Yivesha that we walked through, all the way down to this new pool, Tachtona, that he built. That's why he's talking about the old pool. He built a new pool down near Brechat HaShiloach. Now, he didn't have time to do that. So therefore, it was more or less built as a open tunnel, maybe, as an open aqueduct, maybe even. It wasn't as what?
Reservoir.
No, reservoir is no. I'm talking about the hemshech of the Ta'ala Hayivesha Haknanit. What we walked through was nicely covered. Okay, but that was built by the Canaanim 1,000 years before then. Right. But Chizkiyahu had no time, so therefore he built the hemshech of that thing in a quick and dirty fashion, which is why he had to build a wall. To protect that. Because it was open probably, or even if it was closed, michukmak closed. Okay? And that's why we couldn't walk through it on Friday, because it wasn't in a state where it was tall, with closed up and all that. It's all michukmak. It's all a low little funnel of water, but that's what Chizkiyahu Kanire did. The archaeologists checking the first 190 meters of the Ta'ala HaKnanit and the additional 200 meters, see, two different eras, two different constructions. Clearly, this was built in two different times, okay? And then Hashem makes the miracle. The Assyrians go away. And at this point, Chizkiyahu should have said, Dai, Toda la Hashem, Hodu la Hashem, Kitov. He didn't say Shira. He didn't say Hodu LaHashem Kitov. Okay? Okay? No. Then is when he didn't say Shira.
Same one.
But
Same one?
at that point, this is Sancheriv. Sancheriv. At this point, though, he should have said, okay, I have a tunnel, there's water in the city. We don't have to now continue work on this Ta'alat Nikuz Nikbat Chizkiyahu, which is no longer necessary, because Hashem is telling me that it won't be necessary into the future, because I'm going to protect the city. Chizkiyahu says, no, I want to have this tunnel anyway. The Gemara says, Al zeh shehu satam mei hagichon ha'elyon. Ma kavana elyon? Not hagichon ha'elyon, but rather that he satam the upper opening of the gichon, which led water into the Ta'ala HaKnanit, and let the water go in the lower thing which he built, the Nikvat Chizkiyahu. Zo HaKavana Gichon HaElyon.
Could it also refer to the Elyon that he was
No, but and therefore lo hodulo.
The Perush here is still speaking about the Rova Yehudi Lemala.
Yeah.
They said it, they don't know what they mean